Elon Musk sat in his dimly lit room, the faint hum of his first computer filling the silence. Outside, Pretoria's suburban streets buzzed with life, but inside, Elon's world revolved around the disassembled parts of a Commodore VI-20. His hands moved with precision, connecting wires and chips, his mind racing with possibilities. At 10 years old, Elon was already imagining futures far beyond his small corner of South Africa. The childhood that shaped him was anything but simple. His parents' divorce fractured the family, leaving Elon to navigate the emotional turmoil largely alone. Books became his escape, a sanctuary where he could explore galaxies, time travel, and futures yet to come. By the time he was 12, he had sold his first creation, a video game called Blaster. While his classmates focused on rugby and cricket, Elon immersed himself in programming, unlocking the mysteries of his computer late into the night. School offered no reprieve. Bullied relentlessly, he bore bruises that were both physical and emotional. Each shove, each mocking word, seemed to solidify his resolve. When his mother, May, asked him about the constant bullying, he answered with quiet determination, "One day, I'll do something so big they'll all remember me." By the time he turned 17, Elon faced a choice that would define his future. Remaining in South Africa meant mandatory military service under the apartheid regime, something he could not abide. The alternative was to leave everything he knew behind and start anew. "I'm going to Canada," he told his mother one evening, his voice steady despite the uncertainty of his plan. May, though anxious, saw the spark in his eyes and chose to support him. Elon arrived in Canada with little more than determination and an address of distant relatives. He took on any work he could find, from shoveling grain bins to washing dishes in cramped kitchens. Every paycheck was a step closer to his ultimate goal, earning enough to attend university. Nights were spent poring over textbooks in cramped apartments, dreaming of a day when his efforts would matter. His journey eventually took him to the United States, where his ambitions began to crystallize. At the University of Pennsylvania, Elon's drive was unmatched. His classmates often found him awake at odd hours, scribbling ideas on scraps of paper or debating theories about renewable energy and space travel. "You're going to change the world one day," a friend remarked after listening to one of Elon's impassioned speeches about humanity's future. Elon's response was a simple nod, as though the idea wasn't just a dream but an inevitability. Graduation didn't mark the end of his relentless pursuit, it was merely a transition to a larger stage. Zip2, his first venture, proved his potential as a businessman. While the technology itself was unremarkable, a directory service for businesses, it showcased Elon's knack for turning ideas into lucrative opportunities. When the company sold for over $300 million, Elon didn't bask in the success. Instead, he immediately began plotting his next move. With PayPal, Tesla, and SpaceX, Elon stepped into the spotlight as a disruptor of entire industries. His ascent wasn't without enemies. Established corporations and skeptical investors saw him as a threat, a wild card who ignored traditional rules. The media followed him with equal parts fascination and critique, questioning his ambitious timelines and unorthodox methods. Elon, however, thrived on resistance. "If something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are against you," he once told a journalist, brushing off doubts about SpaceX's early failures. Yet the higher he climbed, the greater the risks became. Elon began to attract not just critics, but dangerous attention. The more he reshaped industries, the more he became a target. High-profile kidnappings of executives in tech and finance were on the rise, and Elon's advisors urged him to take precautions. Reluctantly, he hired a team of elite security personnel. Among them were James, a former Navy SEAL with an unshakable demeanor, and Ava, an intelligence operative whose skill in high-stakes scenarios was matched only by her loyalty. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Elon often sought solace in quiet moments. After a particularly grueling week, he found himself sitting at a bar in Texas, nursing a glass of whiskey and reflecting on his journey. For a man who had revolutionized banking, transportation, and space exploration, peace remained elusive. As the hum of the bar surrounded him, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that his search for a moment of anonymity was about to be shattered. The neon sign outside the Rusty Jack's Tavern flickered in the warm Texas night, casting erratic shadows on the cracked pavement. The bar, tucked away from the bustling streets of Boca Chica, was a modest refuge for locals seeking cold beer and uncomplicated conversation. Elon Musk pushed the door open, stepping inside as the familiar blend of stale beer, aged wood, and distant laughter greeted him. Dressed in jeans and a simple black t-shirt, he looked like any other patron, his usual larger-than-life presence cloaked in casual anonymity. Elon chose a corner table near the jukebox, the dim lighting obscuring his face. His whiskey arrived swiftly, the bartender giving him a brief glance before moving to serve others. The low hum of country music and the clinking of pool balls provided a soothing backdrop as Elon leaned back, savoring the rare solitude. It was a moment to reflect on the recent success of SpaceX's Falcon Heavy launch, a culmination of years of tireless effort and relentless belief in the impossible. But solitude rarely lasts for long. The creak of the door opening drew Elon's attention. Two men stepped inside, their presence instantly commanding the room. Jake, Razor, and Bobby Chains were infamous in the area, their leather jackets adorned with gang insignias and their demeanor radiating menace. Razor's sharp eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Elon before moving to the bar. Chains followed, his broad shoulders brushing past tables as he let out a gravelly laugh that made several patrons shift uncomfortably in their seats. Elon's gaze returned to his glass, deliberately avoiding theirs. He had long learned the art of staying inconspicuous in volatile situations. Unfortunately, Razor had already noticed something about him, something that didn't sit right. "What's a guy like him doing here?" Razor muttered to Chains, nodding toward Elon. Chains smirked, following Razor's lead as they approached Elon's table. The noise of the bar dulled as conversations quieted, patrons sensing trouble. Elon didn't look up when Razor slammed his hand down on the table, making the whiskey glass jump. Well, isn't this a surprise?" Razor said, his voice thick with mockery. "The Rocket Man himself, hiding out in a place like this. What's the matter? NASA didn't want to party with you." Elon glanced up, his expression calm but alert. "Just here for a drink," he replied evenly. Chains chuckled, stepping closer. "Oh, you're here for more than that now. You see, a man like you don't just walk into our bar without showing a little generosity." Razor leaned in, his grin revealing yellowed teeth. "Yeah, maybe a contribution for the local economy. We take cash, credit. Hell, even one of your fancy Teslas will do." Elon took a measured sip of his whiskey before setting the glass down. "Not interested," he said simply, his tone cold enough to cut through the tension. Razor's grin disappeared. He reached for Elon's glass, hurling it to the floor where it shattered, the sound slicing through the now silent room. "You're not getting it," Razor hissed. "This isn't a request." The confrontation was broken by the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. James, Elon's chief of security, rose from his seat at the bar. He had been sitting quietly, keeping a watchful eye, but now he moved with the precision of a predator stalking its prey. His towering figure loomed behind the bikers. "You've got 5 seconds to walk away," James said, his voice low but carrying a weight that made Razor stiffen. Razor turned, his bravado faltering for a split second before he recovered. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" "The Rocket Man's babysitter." Before Razor could finish his taunt, James moved. His hand gripped Razor's wrist in a blur, twisting it with a calculated force that sent the biker to his knees with a cry of pain. Chains lunged forward, but another figure intercepted him, Ava, Elon's other trusted security operative. She moved like a dancer, her lithe frame delivering a precise kick to Chain's stomach that sent him staggering back into a pool table. The room erupted into chaos. Razor struggled against James, who tightened his grip, forcing the biker to drop the knife he had pulled from his jacket. Chains, recovering from Ava's blow, grabbed a cue stick and swung it wildly, missing as Ava ducked and countered with a swift punch to his jaw. Patrons scrambled to the edges of the room, some pulling out phones to record the unfolding brawl. Elon remained seated, his expression unreadable as he watched his security team neutralize the bikers with practiced efficiency. The fight seemed to be over until the bar door slammed open again. A hulking figure filled the frame, the dim light revealing a man built like a tank with a thick beard and cold, calculating eyes. Grizzly, the gang's enforcer, had arrived, flanked by 4 more members armed with chains and makeshift clubs. "Looks like we've got ourselves a party," Grizzly growled, his deep voice carrying a promise of violence. James and Ava positioned themselves protectively in front of Elon. The room tensed as Grizzly and his men advanced, the air heavy with the threat of escalation. "You messed with the wrong people, Musk," Grizzly said, his glare fixed on Elon. "I lost everything because of you. My factory, my family's livelihood. You think you can just walk away from that?" Elon's calm demeanor didn't waver. "If you want to talk about it, I'm listening," he said, his tone steady. Grizzly sneered. "Oh, we'll talk. After I've taught you a lesson." As the gang closed in, Elon reached into his pocket and pressed a small button on his phone. Outside, the hum of an approaching Tesla Cybertruck filled the air. Moments later, the truck's automated system burst through the bar's front wall, scattering debris and creating a moment of confusion. James and Ava seized the opportunity, launching into the gang with calculated strikes. The room became a whirlwind of fists, chains, and broken furniture as the security team fought to protect Elon. In the chaos, Grizzly lunged at Elon, but the entrepreneur sidestepped, using a broken chair leg to fend off the attack. By the time the dust settled, Razor and Chains were unconscious, and Grizzly lay on the floor, subdued by James. The remaining gang members scrambled out the door, retreating into the night. Elon surveyed the wreckage of the bar, his expression unreadable. The bartender, emerging from his hiding spot, looked at him with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Sorry about the mess," Elon said, slipping a wad of cash onto the counter. As James and Ava escorted him outside, Elon couldn't shake Grizzly's words. The night had started as an attempt to find peace, but it ended with a stark reminder of the unintended consequences of his ambitions and the dangers that came with them. The faint glow of dawn began to seep into the Texas desert, casting long shadows over the wreckage of the Rusty Jack's Tavern. Elon Musk sat in the back seat of his Cybertruck, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the horizon as the vehicle sped away from the scene. The bar fight was behind them, but the tension lingered in the air. James drove in silence, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel, while Ava sat in the passenger seat, her gaze flicking between the side mirrors and the road ahead. Elon broke the silence first. "What's the damage?" Ava turned slightly, her tone clipped. "2 of them unconscious. Grizzly is in custody with the local authorities, but his last words suggest this isn't over." James nodded. "He mentioned losing a factory. That's personal, Elon. People don't let grudges like that go." Elon's mind churned. The encounter had been unexpected, but the mention of Grizzly's grievances struck a chord. Over the years, his decisions to streamline operations and close underperforming facilities had not come without collateral damage. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Have the legal team look into his claims," Elon said. "If there's merit to what he said, we'll address it." Ava raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. She knew better than to question his drive to correct past mistakes, even if it came at a personal cost. As the Cybertruck hummed down the empty highway, Ava's phone buzzed. She answered swiftly, her voice sharp and professional. After a brief exchange, she ended the call and turned to Elon. "The video's out," she said grimly. "Someone in the bar recorded the whole fight. It's gone viral. News outlets are already picking it up." Elon frowned. "How bad is it?" "Depends on the angle," Ava replied. "To some, you'll look like a hero, standing your ground against criminals. To others, this will be fuel for every critic who thinks you're reckless." James grunted. "Either way, it paints a target on your back. People will think they can come after you and get their 15 minutes of fame, or worse." Elon's expression darkened. He wasn't afraid for himself, but the idea of anyone close to him being caught in the crossfire gnawed at him. "We'll deal with it," he said simply. Ava's phone buzzed again. This time, her brows knitted into a frown as she read the incoming message. "It's not just the video," she said. "I've got chatter from a few of our sources. Grizzly's gang isn't happy. They're regrouping, and they're not alone." James swore under his breath. How many? Hard to say, Ava replied. But enough to make trouble. They're angry, and they want to make an example out of you, Elon. Elon leaned forward, his focus sharp. Then we take precautions. James, increase security at all SpaceX and Tesla facilities. Ava, start vetting anyone with access to high-level information. If they're coming, they won't find us unprepared. The Cybertruck slowed as they approached Elon's private residence near the SpaceX launch facility. It was an inconspicuous building by design, a stark contrast to the grandeur often associated with billionaires. The gates opened with a quiet hum, and James parked the truck in the underground garage. Inside, the team moved with practiced efficiency. Ava pulled up schematics of the property, reviewing every possible entry point, while James coordinated with additional security personnel. Elon stood in the center of the control room, his arms crossed, watching the flurry of activity. He wasn't used to feeling cornered. Years of pushing boundaries, both technological and personal, had made him resilient, but this was different. This was a fight that couldn't be won with innovation or clever strategy alone. Hours later, as the team finalized preparations, a ping echoed from the central monitor. Ava turned to the screen, her face hardening as she read the incoming data. "They're moving," she said. "We've intercepted messages from Grizzly's contacts. They're planning to hit us tonight." James cracked his knuckles. "Let them try." Elon's gaze shifted between his two trusted operatives. "This isn't just about me anymore. If they're desperate enough, they'll go after anyone connected to my work. We have to shut this down decisively." The hours ticked by, tension thick in the air. Security cameras around the perimeter streamed live footage, showing nothing but empty desert. Yet, the quiet only amplified the anticipation of what was to come. Night fell, and with it came the attack. The first sign was a flicker on the farthest edge of the camera feed, a shadow moving too quickly to be the wind. Then another. Within moments, figures emerged from the darkness, armed with makeshift weapons and determination. "They're here," Ava said, her voice calm but steely. James moved to the control panel, activating the property's defensive measures. Floodlights burst to life, bathing the desert in harsh white light. The intruders froze momentarily, their cover blown. "Time to make an impression," James muttered, strapping on tactical gear. Ava grabbed a headset, coordinating with the additional security forces stationed on the property. The attackers advanced despite the lights, emboldened by their numbers. Elon stayed behind the reinforced glass of the command center, watching the unfolding chaos. His heart pounded, not out of fear but from the weight of responsibility. Every decision he had made, every factory closed, every risk taken, had led to this moment. The clash was swift and brutal. James led the charge, his movements a blend of calculated precision and raw force. Ava flanked the intruders, her agility turning their weapons into liabilities. Security personnel held the line, forcing the attackers into a retreat. But it wasn't just a physical battle. Ava's tactical mind came into play as she used drones to track the retreating attackers, ensuring no one escaped unnoticed. Within minutes, the remaining gang members were subdued, their weapons scattered across the desert floor. As the dust settled, Elon stepped out of the command center, his presence commanding attention despite the chaos. Grizzly, captured once more, glared at him with unrelenting hatred. "This isn't over," Grizzly spat, his voice ragged. "You think you can fix everything with your money and your machines? You'll never understand what you've taken from us." Elon's expression didn't waver. "I can't undo the past," he said, his voice steady. "But I can make things right going forward. You've got a choice, Grizzly. Work with me to rebuild what was lost, or keep fighting and lose even more." The gang leader's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. The night wasn't just a victory. It was a reminder that the fight wasn't over, not for Elon, and not for the world he was trying to shape. The aftermath of the attack lingered like the desert heat, heavy and unrelenting. Elon Musk stood outside his command center, the first rays of dawn slicing through the jagged horizon. The night had been a narrow victory, but it didn't feel like one. Grizzly's warning echoed in his mind, a promise of further retribution. The desert was silent now, save for the hum of a drone overhead, scanning for any stragglers from the gang's failed assault. Inside, Ava and James were reviewing the captured attackers' belongings. Weapons, maps, and scraps of paper covered the conference table. Elon entered, his face lined with exhaustion but his mind racing. "What do we know?" he asked, breaking the silence. Ava gestured to a crudely drawn map marked with red XS. They had a clear plan: hit here, then retreat along the south perimeter. They weren't just angry, they were coordinated. James nodded, crossing his arms. This wasn't a gang looking for a quick score. Grizzly's men were trying to make a statement. They're sending a message: they won't stop until you're down. Elon leaned over the table, studying the map. The XS weren't random. They targeted key access points to his facility and residence. They had help, he said. Grizzly isn't smart enough to plan something this precise. Someone else is pulling the strings. James frowned. You think they've got backing? Maybe financial, maybe logistical, Elon replied. Whoever it is, they're not amateurs. Ava's phone buzzed, pulling her attention to a new message. Her face hardened as she read it. We've got a problem, she said. One of our sources flagged chatter about Grizzly's gang regrouping in Houston. They're meeting with another group, possibly mercenaries. Elon straightened. Then we need to move before they do. If they're consolidating forces, it's only a matter of time before they strike again. James shook his head. Elon, with all due respect, you've got to let law enforcement handle this. You're not the one who should be leading the charge. But Elon's expression was resolute. Law enforcement won't act until it's too late. If I've learned anything, it's that you can't wait for someone else to solve your problems. James sighed, exchanging a look with Ava. They both knew arguing with Elon was futile. We'll need intel, Ava said. And fast. If they're meeting in Houston, we've got a narrow window to intercept before their numbers grow. Elon's private jet was prepped within the hour, and the team departed for Houston with a skeleton crew of trusted operatives. As they flew, Ava sifted through the latest intel feeds, triangulating the gang's meeting location to a derelict warehouse near the docks. When they arrived, the city's humidity wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket. Elon's team moved with practiced efficiency, blending into the shadows as they approached the warehouse. Drones hovered overhead, relaying live feeds to Ava's tablet. Inside the warehouse, Grizzly's remaining men gathered around a makeshift table. Their bruised faces and bandaged limbs bore the marks of the previous night's defeat, but their eyes burned with defiance. Across from them sat a new figure, a man dressed in tactical gear with the air of a seasoned soldier. That's our mercenary, Ava whispered through their comms. Calls himself Viper. Former private military, dishonorably discharged. Dangerous. Elon's jaw tightened as he watched the live feed from the drone. Viper was showing Grizzly a case filled with weapons, his voice low but commanding. We go back tonight, Viper said, his tone dripping with contempt. Your little skirmish was just a warm-up. This time, we take the fight to Musk's doorstep and make sure he doesn't walk away. Grizzly nodded, his hands clenching into fists. I want him alive. I want him to see what he's done. Ava turned to Elon. This is it. If we don't stop them here, they'll be back at your facility within hours. Elon didn't hesitate. We move now. James and the operatives positioned themselves around the warehouse, silently disabling lookouts and setting up breaching charges. Ava directed the drones, marking key targets and monitoring the group's movements inside. The assault began with a flash and a deafening roar as the charges blew open the side entrances. James led the charge, his rifle sweeping the room with precision. Grizzly's men scrambled, caught off guard, while Viper barked orders, trying to regain control. Elon stayed outside, monitoring the operation through Ava's feed. His hands clenched at his sides as he watched his team execute their plan with ruthless efficiency. Inside, the fight was chaos. James and Ava moved like a storm, their years of training evident in every calculated move. Viper fought back with brutal precision, using the environment to his advantage. He ducked behind crates, firing suppressive bursts that forced James to take cover. Ava circled around, flanking Viper. She engaged him in close combat, her movements fluid and deadly. The two exchanged blows, their fists and knives clashing in a vicious dance. Grizzly, meanwhile, tried to slip away in the chaos, but James intercepted him near the loading bay. The two men squared off, their eyes locking in mutual hatred. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Grizzly snarled. "You're just a thug protecting a man who destroys lives." James didn't flinch. "You made your choices. Now you live with them." With a swift, brutal motion, James incapacitated Grizzly, leaving him sprawled on the ground. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Viper, bloodied but conscious, was restrained by Ava, while the remaining gang members were rounded up by Elon's operatives. As Elon entered the warehouse, the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. He walked to where Viper knelt, glaring up at him with unbridled contempt. "You've lost," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. Viper sneered. "You think this is over? You can't stop people like us. For every one of us you take down, 10 more will rise." Elon's gaze hardened. "Then I'll deal with them too." Turning to Ava and James, he said, "Get law enforcement here. Make sure they face justice." As the authorities arrived and took the attackers into custody, Elon stood outside the warehouse, the weight of the night pressing heavily on his shoulders. He had stopped the immediate threat, but the fight had left scars, on the landscape, on his team, and on himself. For all his success, Elon realized that the battle for progress wasn't just fought in boardrooms and laboratories. It was a war waged in the shadows, against forces that resisted change with every ounce of their being. And he was far from finished. The tension in the air was palpable as the private jet ascended into the night sky, carrying Elon Musk and his team back to Texas. The warehouse takedown in Houston had been a success, but the victory felt hollow. Elon stared out the window at the dark expanse below, his reflection in the glass a somber silhouette. The remnants of Grizzly's gang were in custody, but the chaos they'd unleashed left lingering questions about the consequences of his decisions. Across the cabin, James and Ava sat quietly, both nursing fresh bruises from the fight. The hum of the jet's engines was the only sound between them until Ava finally broke the silence. "Viper isn't just another thug," she said, her voice low but firm. "He's a symptom of a bigger problem. There's anger out there, Elon, against the companies, the tech, the disruption. And you're the face of all of it." James nodded in agreement. "It's not just about Grizzly losing his factory. People see you as untouchable, someone who changes the rules without considering the fallout. That kind of resentment doesn't just go away." Elon turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "You're saying this isn't the last time something like this will happen?" "It's not," James said bluntly. "You're a target now, and not just for gangs. It could be anyone, disgruntled workers, opportunists, even organized groups." Elon leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. He had always believed that the path to progress was lined with challenges, but he hadn't fully reckoned with the human cost of his decisions. The closure of the factory that had driven Grizzly to this point wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern of disruption that left some people behind while propelling others forward. The conversation was interrupted by a ping from Ava's tablet. She tapped the screen, her eyes narrowing as she read the latest update. "Grizzly's interrogation just started," she said. "He's not talking much, but he keeps repeating the same thing. Musk owes us." James frowned. "Owes them what?" "He already offered reparations." Elon shook his head. "It's not just about money or jobs. For people like Grizzly, it's personal. They want acknowledgement, an apology, maybe even redemption. Something money can't buy." Ava tilted her head thoughtfully. "So what do you do? You can't just meet with every person who's upset with you." "No," Elon replied, his voice firm. "But I can start by addressing the bigger picture." The plane touched down in Boca Chica just as dawn broke over the launch facility. Elon wasted no time, calling his senior advisors to convene a strategy session. The team gathered in the sleek conference room overlooking the rocket assembly hangar, their expressions tense as they awaited his direction. Elon paced the room, his voice carrying an intensity that commanded attention. "We've made incredible strides, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and beyond. But somewhere along the way, we've neglected the human cost of that progress. Grizzly's gang isn't just an isolated case. They're part of a growing wave of people who feel left behind. If we don't address this now, it won't just be my reputation on the line, it'll be the future of everything we're trying to build." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Finally, one of the advisors spoke. "So, what do we do? How do we even begin to repair this?" Elon stopped pacing, his gaze sharp. "We go back to the places we've impacted the most. Start with the communities where factories were closed or where automation displaced jobs. We listen. We invest. Not just in infrastructure, but in people. Education, training, opportunities. They're as important as the technologies we're developing." Ava leaned forward, her skepticism evident. "That's going to be a long, uphill battle. And it won't erase what's already been done." "It's not about erasing the past," Elon replied. "It's about building a future that includes everyone, not just the people who benefit immediately." The plan took shape over the following weeks. Elon's team mobilized quickly, identifying key regions where his company's actions had caused the most disruption. Community leaders were contacted, forums were organized, and projects were funded. A shuttered Tesla factory in California was repurposed into a training center for renewable energy jobs, and in Texas, a pilot program was launched to teach coding and robotics to underprivileged youth. Grizzly's hometown was at the top of the list. The abandoned factory that had been the source of his anger was transformed into a community innovation hub, complete with job training programs and startup incubators. Elon made a point of meeting with former workers, listening to their stories and addressing their grievances directly. The media took notice. Headlines ranged from praise, Musk's mission, healing the wounds of progress, to skepticism, too little, too late. Regardless of the opinions, the initiative began to gain traction. Meanwhile, James and Ava worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure Elon's safety. Threats continued to surface, but their heightened security measures kept potential dangers at bay. One afternoon, Elon received an unexpected visitor. Grizzly, now released from custody, had agreed to meet under the condition of no cameras or press. The meeting took place at the newly renovated facility in his hometown. Grizzly entered the room, his demeanor cautious but no longer hostile. He took a seat across from Elon, the tension between them palpable. "You didn't have to do all this," Grizzly said, his voice low. "The programs, the factory, it won't bring back what we lost." Elon met his gaze steadily. "No, it won't. But it's a start. And if we're going to move forward, we need to start somewhere." Grizzly leaned back, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he nodded. "Maybe you're not as out of touch as I thought." The meeting ended without fanfare, but as Grizzly left the building, something had shifted. For the first time, Elon felt that his actions might be making a difference, not just for his companies, but for the people whose lives they touched. As he watched Grizzly walk away, Elon knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But he also knew that progress wasn't just about reaching for the stars. It was about ensuring that no one was left behind on the journey. The unveiling of the new Community Innovation Hub in Grizzly's hometown was a quiet yet momentous occasion. The crowd gathered in the refurbished factory included former workers, local leaders, and residents who had once cursed Elon Musk's name. Now, many looked at him with cautious optimism. The factory, once a hollowed-out shell, now buzzed with life. Machines hummed, classrooms were filled with students learning coding and robotics, and workshops hosted entrepreneurs shaping their visions for a better future. Elon stood on the modest stage in the center of the main hall. The spotlight felt heavier than usual, but he didn't shy away. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the crowd before speaking. "Progress isn't just about moving forward, it's about bringing people with us," he began, his voice steady but laced with conviction. "For too long, we've focused on the destination without thinking about those left behind. This hub isn't a solution to everything, but it's a step. A place to rebuild, to create, and to grow together. A smattering of applause broke the silence. Elon wasn't expecting fanfare. This was about action, not recognition. Beside him, James and Ava stood watchful, scanning the room for any signs of trouble. They knew better than anyone that the path to change was rarely without resistance. After the ceremony, Elon moved through the crowd, shaking hands and listening to stories. He spoke to a man who had worked at the factory for 20 years before it closed, a woman who was teaching welding to a new generation, and a teenager excited about the prospect of building his first robot. Grizzly was there too, leaning against a wall at the edge of the room. He watched Elon with an expression that was no longer hostile but still carried the weight of lingering mistrust. When Elon approached, Grizzly straightened, his massive frame casting a shadow over the brightly lit space. "It's a start," Grizzly said, his tone gruff but softer than before. "It is," Elon replied. "But it only works if everyone commits to making it better." Grizzly nodded, his lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. That moment of hope, however, was short-lived. Ava's voice crackled through Elon's earpiece. "We've got a situation," she said. Elon's demeanor shifted instantly. He excused himself from the conversation, moving to a quieter corner where James and Ava were huddled around a tablet. The screen displayed live security footage of an unfamiliar vehicle parked just outside the facility's perimeter. "Unmarked van," Ava reported. "Arrived 10 minutes ago. No plates. 3 men inside, heavily armed." James's face darkened. "They're not here for the tour." Elon's jaw tightened. "Do we evacuate?" "Not yet," Ava said. "We don't want to cause panic. Let's contain this before it escalates." The trio moved swiftly to the control room, where the security team was already monitoring the situation. The men in the van appeared to be communicating with someone via earpieces, their movements deliberate. "We can't wait," James said. "If they're armed, they're a threat." Elon nodded. "Do what you have to." James and Ava moved with precision, coordinating with the on-site security team. Elon stayed behind, watching the feeds and trusting his team to handle the situation. Outside, James led a small tactical group toward the van, keeping to the shadows. Ava flanked from the opposite side, her sidearm drawn. The men inside the van seemed unaware of the encroaching forces until it was too late. James signaled, and in a matter of seconds, the team swarmed the vehicle. The men inside reacted quickly, but not quickly enough. One reached for a weapon but was disarmed by Ava with a swift strike, while James subdued another with brutal efficiency. The third surrendered without resistance, raising his hands in the air as the rest of the team secured the area. The aftermath revealed a chilling discovery. Inside the van were detailed plans of the facility, including schematics of the event layout and escape routes. Explosives were found stashed under the seats, alongside military-grade firearms. "They weren't here to protest," James said grimly, holding up the blueprints. "They were here to send a message." Ava stepped forward, her face set in a hard line. "They've got ties to a known extremist group. Anti-tech, anti-automation. They blame you for everything, Elon. Job losses, the changing world, it's all on you in their eyes." Elon stared at the plans, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on his shoulders. "Did they say anything?" "One of them mentioned more coming," Ava replied. "But he didn't say when or where." Elon's mind raced. The attack had been narrowly avoided, but it was clear that this was far from over. His work, his vision for the future, was a threat to those who feared change. That night, as the facility emptied and the detained men were handed over to law enforcement, Elon sat alone in his office. The glow of his laptop illuminated his face as he reviewed footage of the day's events. Despite the danger, he felt an unshakable resolve. James entered, his expression tired but calm. "We've tightened security across all facilities," he said. "We'll be ready for whatever comes next." Elon nodded but didn't look up from his screen. "This won't be the last time, James. There will always be someone who resists what we're building." James sat across from him, his voice steady. "You're right. But every time they push back, you have to push harder. That's how you've gotten this far." Elon finally looked up, his eyes fierce. Then we keep going. Not just for the technology, but for the people it's meant to help. Outside, the night was still, the quiet a stark contrast to the chaos of earlier. But for Elon Musk and his team, the battle was far from over. Progress wasn't just a destination, it was a fight. And they were ready for whatever came next.
If you enjoyed the story and want to see more content like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and turning on notifications.